Hey guys, it's me, Javier. You're in for a treat today. I'm being joined by my two friends from forever. Like we are now podcast veterans at this point, right? It's Tim and Lance from Crawlspace and Missing, and we have a great story because actually Tim contacted me. He's like, "Hey, Javier, I loved your grave detector series. Did you know?" And then he told me this great story, and I was like, "Okay, we got to record this, right?" So welcome, Tim and Lance.
Thanks for having us, Javier.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anytime we have the opportunity to spill the insider baseball for your listeners, we're here for you.
Oh man,
Yeah.
and this is such an important story, I think, because it's tangential to the Arpod Vast story that I covered on my show, and I think what's really important to note right off the bat, okay, is that the person that we're going to talk about today hasn't done anything wrong, hasn't done anything illegal, okay, but it does fall under this category of very questionable area within our field, right, of true crime, where it's kind of like this Venn diagram of true crime entertainment and real police investigative work, right? So the person who we're going to be really focusing on today is Alex Baber, who is from the Cold Case Consultants of America. And you guys had the opportunity to interview both Alex and his wife, right? So tell me about that.
Yeah. So we first heard of Alex and J-Lynn Baber because they were working on Maura Murray's missing person case. And they did a couple of interviews about how they were going to help search and came off very confident. So we kind of just, we hadn't heard of them and we had been covering Maura Murray's disappearance for years at that point. And so we reached out to them to see what they were all about. And we ended up interviewing them about the case and putting that episode online. It's on the podcast, but it's also on YouTube.
And my wife and I having a background, mine being in protective services as a PSO, and also having worked cases since 2007 behind the scenes before going public in the last 5, almost 6 months. We have a knack for this.
I'm actually an Army veteran as well as Air Force. I did presidential and diplomatic security and then was attached to psychological operations. Currently, I'm trying to obtain my forensics psychiatry.
And we kind of knew while we were interviewing them that there was something off about it. Sometimes we can text during the interviews, and this is taking a weird route, immediately.
I got that sense too, that you guys were really, questioning, and I loved the interview. I will link to it in the show notes, but I loved how you really seized on the opportunity to call BS and when it was necessary, because these guys, their business is called Cold Case Consultants of America, and it sounds really official, right? And this guy is a great, smooth talker, but it's a lot of empty calories, right? When there's a lot of big talk, but not a lot of things to back it up. For instance, one of the things that stood out for me from your conversation with him is that Alex Baber claims that he has the largest known singular database of letters written by serial killers dating back to 1944. The collection features more than 500 letters, which have been digitized and cross-checked for forensic patterns, the origins, correlating content, and linguistic similarities. Sounds amazing, except I've never seen this thing. Have you seen this database?
No.
Okay, and then I'm wondering where the heck did he get this data from, right?
Yeah.
and like he's just spinning up so much stuff that you guys didn't even have the opportunity to ask him all these counter questions to these ridiculous claims, right?
Okay, so where did the samples come from that you built this database?
It came from the original family members that had copies from their actual case files for, say, their daughter, son, father, sister, brother. Some of them were FOIA requests on cases that have been closed, where the individual that was prosecuted or persecuted. Some of these cases, the media persecuted the individual, literally. And we're able to get those files because then the case is closed. So you get access to public records. Some of the cases, the retired detectives have opened their personal files to us and given us access. So we've kind of got a variety of assembling these letters here. We've been very, very lucky in having this access and gaining these letters and having this ability to correlate them.
Wow. Okay. So how many cases then are included in this linguistic database?
In all honesty, when you talk about cases, you got to understand some of these cases are multiple murders.
Well, it was interesting because Tim said when he was talking about this right in the beginning, at a certain point during that conversation, we realized that this was going to be a conversation that we had to take a sort of pivot on. And when we presented it to the listeners, it had to be presented not in the way that we originally intended, which was introducing new investigators to Maura Murray's disappearance, which was what we thought it was going to be. And at some point, we had to pivot and approach the conversation in a different way. Because, like you said, he had all of these like empty calories. I love that. That's exactly accurate. There were all these empty calories in there. A lot of bragging, a lot of overconfidence. And I think that's like one of those keys that, we've had a handful of interviews where we hear this and they'll come on and they'll say, listen, guys, no bullshit. I don't bullshit around. I get this done. When I come into this, I get this done. And then it's like, there's no humility there. There's no relatability. We've spoken with a number of private investigators, current, former law enforcement, and I would say 99% of them have this humility to them. Have this like at least like on a human level you can relate to them, and to bust into the conversation with these grand proclamations is just such a huge red flag.
I'm going to play a clip of what you were just talking about, that no bullshit. Let's play it.
We have the ability as far as expertise here. And I think, again, that we should be able to locate her. I feel very positive in saying that. And one thing I don't do is bullshit, guys. You can ask anybody that knows me. So if I call it, I'm dead on. But I want to bring Maura home. She deserves to come home. And we're going to power to do that. We have the ability as far as expertise here. And I think, again, that we should be able to locate her. I feel very positive in saying that. And one thing I don't do is bullshit, guys. You can ask anybody that knows me. So if I call it, I'm dead on. But I want to bring Maura home. She deserves to come home. And we're going to power to do that.
Yeah, but before we go too much further, I do want to mention that Alex's wife in the interview, J-Lynn Baber, doesn't really take the same role as him in the conversation. She doesn't speak quite as much. And when she does, Alex will turn his head to her, like awkwardly, like staring right at her, like a few feet away. And you can tell it kind of puts like extra pressure on her to make answers. I don't really know them.
But she was not present during that interview. It was like she said a couple things. She flashed her credentials and she took a back seat, right?
Yeah, and people on YouTube kind of question her credentials, and other experts who messaged us after the interview kind of question what she said specifically. But she's not on their website anymore, and as far as I can tell, like they may not even be together anymore. So I did just kind of want to separate them a little bit as far as this conversation goes.
Yeah, I think that's important to do, to separate her, because there were so many of these indicators that we had seen in the past through parents talking about their kids, especially their daughters, who have been in an abusive situation. And the parents will say, I noticed this and I noticed this. And we've had experts come on and just talk about behaviors of people in abusive situations. And I'm not saying that this was the case with Alex and his wife. I'm just saying that after that conversation, we had a conversation and we were saying, were any of those indicators present right there? Because when Tim said that he was looking at her, it wasn't in like a prideful way. It wasn't in a way where he was
admiring her,
right? It was in a way where it was like, stick to the script.
So another red flag for me, and this is why we're doing this episode, is because we are consumers of true crime, right? And when I say we, I mean the three of us, but also everyone listening to this right now, right? We listen to a lot of true crimes. And in true crime news, paper articles, or, documentaries or podcasts, we feature a lot of experts, right? And it's upon us to really weed out the real players from the fake players. But you as a listener should watch out when somebody says, like Alex Baber says, that he believes that he has the answer to this modern tragedy and can choose from classic cold case canons like the Black Delilah, the Free Phantom, the Texarkana Moonlight Murderer, and the Oak County's Child Killer. Like he's going to solve all these old cases. I mean, the real investigators that we've talked to in the past, they have that one case that they've worked on their whole life, and that takes a lifetime for them, right? And this guy is, he claims he could solve any case, right?
He's an expert
One of
in
the
everything,
things,
Javier.
yes, one of the cases was the lipstick killer case, and I don't know how familiar you guys are with that, but police found a bloody fingerprint smudge on the door jamb entrance door. And some witnesses heard gunshots at 4 a.m. and they arrested somebody in that case. Well, Alex Baber claims that he has, evidence that even the police don't have. So you got to wonder when you hear claims like these, is this real? Is this guy for real?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the things that he said you can't really question, like officially. You can't find evidence to disprove stuff. Like where does he get all these letters? He got them from, if he says he got them from family or retired detectives or something like that. Like you can't really say, well, no, you didn't, even though it's probably unlikely that he did. Yeah, it's a weird thing. The way he talks, but I think he does it very intentionally, sort of getting around things that you can disprove. The thing about having solved Zodiac ciphers that the Zodiac wrote was kind of absurd to me. And then he said that he was like in like a message board group or something and got a phone call from the Zodiac killer because he solved one of his ciphers.
We have all these letters, right, that we've accumulated over 14 years here. And we have letters in the public's never seen. I have letters in the Kid cases, the Atlanta child murder cases that was sent in by the Ghost Killer and the Zodiac. I have Zodiac letters that public's never seen. I have Circleville letters that public's never seen. Only eyes of law enforcement has ever been laid on these. And I've been given access to them. So we put these into this database we created. And again, we cross-reference the full spectrum here. We have what's called a register hit. So say there's a misspelling of a very odd word, like the Zodiac used truly, Truely, in his 1979 January 29th return letter after being on a hiatus for 34 months. Well, if you research that, the spelling of that word is less than 1%. It's actually at 0%. It's 1880 as far as being in general context on any level.
Why? So here's my next question for you guys. Why him? Why would, let's say this is true, why would retired detectives and families release information to him? Like, what is his professional background as far as you know?
Great question. Great question. And I think I want to maybe pull that apart a little bit and say, I'm not sure about the former law enforcement detectives, but families in a desperate situation when they're going on a couple of decades, several decades with no answers, will do something extreme and reach out or connect back with someone who reached out to them who happens to be this like snake oil salesperson. They'll do anything if they're desperate for answers. And there's people like him and whatever that organization is that he works for, the Cold Case Consultants of America, who will take advantage of that. They'll take money. They'll take money from families. They'll take information because that just sort of pads their credibility. So they'll have the information. They'll take money. They'll fill their heads with all of these ideas of grandeur and all, I don't stop until the job's done. And then there's no answer. There's no answer because there hasn't been an answer for 20 or 30 years. So who's this guy who's going to find an answer? So that was just a little bit of an elaboration, I guess, on your original question. I don't know about law enforcement, but if someone like that was coming to me and I was law enforcement asking for files, I'd be like, take your empty holster and hit the bricks. I mean, come on.
You don't realize his genius, his true genius.
Yeah. Well, as far as we know, his professional experiences, he claims he was a protective service officer and a diplomatic security. We don't have confirmation of that, but we do know from some of your research, what is in his resume or his CV that you know of?
I believe he
was
was
a car
salesman.
Yeah.
So we try to do our best when we're vetting guests that come on the show, especially ones that have these claims. And we did a background check on him, and yeah, it lists one of his professions as a car salesman. No insult to car salespeople. I mean, that's a fine profession, but it's a long ways away from, what was that? The diplomatic protection.
Yeah, but even if we take what he says is his professional experience to account, like let's say that's true, because we don't know that it's not true, that still does not give him any qualifications to tackle the cases that he says he's tackling. Like, why would we trust a guy who has no law enforcement or investigative experience to tackle some of these big cases that he's contacting families? He's taking money, presumably, from these families. It's like, to me, that's the real danger here.
Yeah, it's very possible. My question is, what in Arpad Voss did Alex Baber see to want to pair up with him, or vice versa? Do you know what I mean?
Dr. Arpad Voss has already been with the family on a previous occasion and has been out there. He has patented machines that he uses to detect decomposition in the air. You can detect decomposition up to 75 to 100 years. This is patent machinery that he's actually developed.
Yeah, and to fill in the blank for our listeners is that not only this is not Alex Baber going on his own with the Cold Case Consultants of America. This is like the Justice League of pseudoscience. You know what I mean? Like they have, Arpad Voss, who we've already talked about, and his skills. So this is like you hire these guys and you get a bunch of, really questionable investigators to take your precious money and your precious time away from the tragedy that has defined your life, And there's a quote that says, "We have never declined a single request from a family looking for help." Of course not. I mean, if they're willing to pay, of course you're going to try to help them. But the question is, are you qualified?
The website looks pretty professional. It's generic, but it does... It is something that you could probably find if you're Googling for like investigative help for your loved one's cold case, and we know because we're on the board of private investigations for the missing, which really does exactly that. For cases of missing people, they will help. And we get a lot of emails. We hear about we don't get them directly, but they get like 100 emails a year from real families looking so. That is kind of what scares me about this. Like, I hope families of, murdered, missing, or murdered loved ones, aren't finding them and really putting their trust in these people.
So my favorite part of your interview with Alex Baber was the fact that he reveals something very personal to you guys about his, about his mental health or health in general. He claims that he has this condition called perceptionism, which might be true, but he paints himself almost like this Rain Man character, where this is like the superpower that he has, like that he's too smart and that he's constantly cracking codes in his head, even while he's sleeping. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I would hope that, I would imagine that somebody with that condition, that they have, this like Rain Man ability, that they wouldn't brag about it, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, right. That's like the humble brag. Like I can't help it. It's a gift and a curse. Like, dude.
As a child, I've been a autodidact and a polymath since I was, old enough to put my pants on. And then I was diagnosed with perceptionism at the age of 12, almost 13. Which is basically my brain's kind of wired a little bit different than the average individual. So when I look at a case file, or I look, even the database we created of the serial killer letters and unapprehended perpetrators, we have over Total, we have over 2,000. I mean, but we only disclose we have 500. We don't give everything away necessarily, but we run cross-reference for the context, the syntax, anything that linguistics, and then we get this feedback. But that I have the ability to kind of identify things the average individual doesn't. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because it never goes away. My wife can validate that part. So, but that's one of the benefits that we have, and that's one of the strong points that I bring to the table. Leading the pack.
Okay. Yeah.
What was that called again?
Which one? Perceptionism? So
yes, perceptionism.
Or like, yeah, and there are people that synesthesia. The people have like weird abilities that people that never forget. Like I've seen those 2020 episodes, right?
So I mean, when I look at like a cipher or code or a letter, the way our brain wires, there's other people out there like me. And I've actually uncovered some of these individuals being on the other side of the fence as, serial killers that we've been able to identify. I identified one in 2007 publicly, and he actually ended up contacting me on my cell phone like 42 hours later. And he knew where I lived, he knew my name, he knew, my fiance's name. So we had to sell our house within 2 months and go off grid, literally, for safety purposes at that time. Then after I got back into it again before we reopened the company, like three years ago, almost 4 years ago, I found out that he passed on in 2010. So, but he was literally, he knew where I was, and he asked me if I wanted to play a game. He wanted to engage with me one-on-one. So it was one of those, moments where reality sets in, where you're not necessarily in a safe zone looking at these cases.
But it's funny because even within if this were true, even within your interview, when you were asking him about the Maura Murray case, he had trouble remembering a certain detail when you challenged him. Let's play the clip.
Is there something that we missed with her being charged with DUI? Because as far as I know, she was never actually charged with any DUIs, and it was never actually proven that she was drunk during the accident.
Yeah, she was drunk when she hit the guardrail head on. I know that to be factual. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I just want to be clear with anyone who's listening that there's no information out there that
there's no charge if there's not a person to charge. She's missing. It happened on a Friday, happened on a Monday, right? There's nobody to show up in court to be charged.
Yeah, but there was an officer there at that first accident. I don't believe he charged her with a DUI. And I think when he responded to a reporter's question, he said, I would have charged her with a DUI had she been drunk.
I'm going to have to look. I've heard differently. I'll look into it a little bit closer to see whether he charged her or not. I don't think she was ever charged.
If he has this perceptionism, he probably should remember that very clearly, right? Yeah. But here's the real. This is where he was a little out of his league, because I could see him running circles around somebody who's not familiar with the details of any particular case. But he's on your show, and you guys have devoted, you started your podcast because of the Maura Murray case, okay? Well, very few people know this case inside out more than the two of you, right? And the investigators working and the family affected. Okay, so he's now on your home turf, and he is challenging the case facts and the details of the case, like to your face. Tell me about that.
That's always interesting when we hear people, and we never claim to be experts on that. I don't think we've ever said that we're experts, but we know a lot of details, and we've been there. And I feel like if you come with that attitude, you need to have been at the scene. You need to have driven that road, at least at the, not Google Earthed it. There are a lot of elements to that area that don't come into the conversation when people are investigating it from afar.
Yeah.
And he had never been there, unless I'm mistaken. I don't believe he had ever been there. And that sets me off, because it's you can't have that opinion that one thing or another happened unless you stand there, unless you drive the mile or so leading up to where that hairpin turn is and understand the condition of the road, the way the road is windy before that hairpin turn, what that river looks like.
Right.
You can't do it.
Right.
So you need to just simmer down.
Tim, can you tell me a little bit, and my listeners, just for the people who are unfamiliar with the Maura Murray case, in a nutshell, what it's about, so that we could dive into specific details about your conversation with him?
Sure. Yeah. There are so many unknowns in Maura Murray's case that it is really hard for anyone to be an expert in the case unless you're law enforcement. And law enforcement doesn't do a lot of talking about the case. And if they do, it's to family members. And at times over the years, they had given us like pictures or answers to questions and things like that. And so Maura Murray was a 21-year-old college student from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, Massachusetts. And so she was going to college at that time. And she drove up Highway 91 through New Hampshire and Vermont and back into New Hampshire, and I guess spun out or had some kind of single car accident on Route 112 on her way to somewhere. I think it's believed she got out of the car on her own because it's locked, and possibly walked down the road, possibly got into a car, possibly walked further. There are woods there. I feel uncomfortable calling us experts in the case because I feel like we're more like experts in the effect of the culture around the case than anything.
Well, but there were, I understand that. But you see the difference here is that you guys, when I said that, few people know the case better than you, you're like, no, wait, hold up. You created a barrier so that, you're not trying to oversell yourself, right? But in your conversation with Alex Baber, I felt it was the opposite. Like I felt like he knew way more about this case than you guys. Yeah. And for example, he was challenging you on. He claims that Maura Murray was arrested with a DUI, and I forget which one of you were telling him, like, wait a minute, how do you know? Like, do you have proof that she was arrested? And he challenged you. Do you remember that part of the conversation?
Yeah. There was something else too. You're kind of jogging my memory. Wasn't there something else that he was like, come on, guys. I mean, we know this. Come on, guys.
Guys, thank you so much for sharing this story for me. I think it's really important to reiterate Alex Baber is not doing anything wrong. He has every right to do whatever he wants to do and start whatever business he wants to do. But if you are a victim of, a homicide survivor or anyone that's looking into him and you're considering getting his services, just do your research. Okay. Lance, Tim, and I, a lot of red flags went off for us. Hopefully you could do your due diligence and make that decision yourself. But thank you guys so much for sharing this story with us. I thought it was great.
My God. Thank you for allowing us to revisit this. And I will say, just on the tail end of what you just said, if you are somebody who has a family member who's a victim or a survivor, or they're missing and you need help, you need a private investigator, go to Private Investigations for the Missing. Go to investigationsforthemissing.org. They're legit.
Yes.
And we know that because we've been a part of them for years.
Yes. And even if you already are working with a private investigator, go to your state's website and search for their license. Okay. That is one simple thing that you could do that's publicly available information that you could know that you're working with somebody legit. As far as I know, I spent some time looking at the states that Alex Baber has worked in or lived in, and I could not find a private investigator license. So take that with a grain of salt, right?
And if you're in the market for a new car to you, a pre-owned Toyota,
I know a guy.
Hey, apologies to all our car salesmen, but seriously, you guys are very convincing, so you're good. But anyways, thank you guys so much. Make sure to check out Crawlspace or Missing. These guys are awesome. Find them on social media. I'll have a link to their shows in the show notes. And thank you for finally coming on Pretend.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.